What if I told you that one of history's most tragic royal murders might have left behind a survivor? A 17-year-old girl who vanished into thin air, only to reappear decades later claiming to be Russia's lost princess. This is the story that has captivated the world for over a century, blending royal intrigue, revolutionary chaos, and one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. But before we dive into this incredible tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, because the story you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the fall of the Russian Empire. The Golden Cage. The year was 1914, and 17-year-old Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanov was living what seemed like a fairy tale life. Born into one of the most powerful royal families in history, she was the youngest daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, ruler of the vast Russian Empire. But Anastasia was no ordinary princess. While her older sisters were known for their grace and refinement, Anastasia was different. She was mischievous, witty, and had an infectious laugh that could light up even the darkest palace corridors. Her tutors often complained that she was more interested in climbing trees than learning French, more fascinated by practical jokes than proper etiquette. But behind the palace walls, a storm was brewing that would tear apart not just the Romanov family, but the entire fabric of Russian society. The Russian people were suffering. World War I had claimed millions of lives, the economy was crumbling, and revolutionary sentiment was spreading like wildfire through the streets of St. Petersburg and Moscow. The name Romanov, once synonymous with divine authority, was becoming a symbol of everything wrong with Russia. The point of no return. By 1917, the situation had become untenable. Strikes paralyzed the capital, soldiers were deserting en masse, and even the Tsar's own generals were turning against him. On March 15, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II made the fateful decision that would seal his family's fate. He abdicated the throne. But abdication wasn't enough for the revolutionaries. The provisional government that took power initially planned to send the family into exile in Britain. However, as political chaos consumed Russia, even this plan fell apart. When the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in October 1917, the Romanov family's situation became increasingly desperate. Anastasia, now 18, found herself trapped in what had become a luxurious prison. The family was moved from palace to palace, each location more restrictive than the last, until finally, they arrived at their final destination, a modest merchant's house in the remote Siberian town of Yekaterinburg. The house belonged to Nikolai Ipatiev, and it would forever be known as the House of Special Purpose. For the Romanov family, it would become the end of the line. The House of Special Purpose life in the Ipatiev house was a stark contrast to the opulence the family had known. The windows were painted over so they couldn't see outside. Guards watched their every move. Their daily routine consisted of simple meals, brief walks in a small enclosed yard, and long hours of uncertainty about their future. But even in these dire circumstances, Anastasia's spirit remained unbroken. According to the guards' testimonies, she continued to find ways to lift her family's spirits. She would perform little comedic sketches, tell jokes, and even manage to befriend some of the younger guards with her charm and wit. What the family didn't know was that their fate had already been sealed. Lenin himself had given the order. The Romanov family had to be eliminated. The local Bolshevik leader, Yakov Yurovsky, was tasked with carrying out this grim mission. On the night of July 16, 1918, Yurovsky told the family they needed to move to the basement for their safety due to approaching anti-Bolshevik forces. It was a lie. As they gathered in that small basement room, Tsar Nicholas, Tsarina Alexandra, their 4 daughters including Anastasia, their son Alexei, and 4 loyal servants. None of them could have imagined what was about to happen. The night that changed history. At approximately 2:15 a.m. on July 17, 1918, Yurovsky and his execution squad entered the basement. What happened next has been reconstructed from the testimonies of the killers themselves, and it's a scene that defies imagination. Yurovsky read a brief statement declaring that the Ural Regional Soviet had decided to execute them. Before the family could fully comprehend what was happening, the shooting began. The basement erupted in chaos. Gunfire, screaming, and smoke filled the small room. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The execution didn't go as planned. Several of the family members, including the daughters, didn't die immediately. They had sewn diamonds and jewelry into their corsets, which acted like primitive, bulletproof vests. In the chaos and confusion, some of the victims were still moving, still breathing. What followed was a horrific scene, as the executioners used bayonets and rifle butts to finish what the bullets had started. But in that chaos, in that confusion, could someone have escaped? Could one of the daughters, perhaps Anastasia, have somehow survived? The mysterious survivor. 2 years later, in 1920, a young woman was pulled from a canal in Berlin. She had attempted suicide and refused to reveal her identity. She was taken to a psychiatric hospital, where she remained silent for months. When she finally spoke, she made a claim that would captivate the world. She was Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanov. The woman, who would later be known as Anna Anderson, bore an uncanny resemblance to the lost princess. She had intimate knowledge of the Romanov family's private life, their habits, their relationships. She knew details that only someone who had lived in the palace could know, but there were inconsistencies. She spoke with a Polish accent, not Russian. She couldn't remember certain events that Anastasia surely would have remembered. Some of her stories changed over time. Yet, several people who had known the real Anastasia swore that this woman was indeed the lost princess. The believers and the doubters. Anna Anderson's claim divided the world. On one side were those who believed her story completely. Pierre Gilead, who had been Anastasia's tutor, initially rejected her claims, but later became convinced she was genuine after spending time with her. Several surviving Romanov relatives also supported her claim, including Anastasia's cousin, who said he recognized her immediately. The believers pointed to her detailed knowledge of palace life, her familiarity with family nicknames, and her physical resemblance to Anastasia. They argued that trauma from the execution could explain her memory gaps and changed behavior. On the other side were the skeptics, including many other Romanov relatives who insisted she was an imposter. They pointed to her inability to speak proper Russian, her failure to recognize people who should have been familiar to her, and inconsistencies in her story. The controversy raged for decades. Anna Anderson became a celebrity of sorts, the subject of books, films, and endless speculation. She married, lived a quiet life in Virginia, and maintained her claim until her death in 1984, the scientific revolution. For over 60 years, the question remained unanswered. Then, in 1991, something extraordinary happened. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russian investigators were finally able to search for the remains of the Romanov family. In a forest outside Yekaterinburg, they discovered a grave containing 9 bodies. Initial analysis suggested these were the remains of the Tsar, Serena, 3 of their daughters, and 4 servants. But 2 bodies were missing, Alexei and 1 daughter. Could one of them have been Anastasia? DNA analysis began, using samples from living relatives of the Romanovs, including Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who was related to the Serena. The results confirmed that the remains were indeed those of the Romanov family members. But which daughter was missing? In 2007, another grave was discovered containing 2 more bodies, a young man and a young woman. DNA analysis confirmed these were the remains of Alexei and the missing daughter. All of the Romanov children had been accounted for. The entire family had perished that night in 19... But what about Anna Anderson? In 2009, DNA analysis was performed on hair samples that had been saved from Anna Anderson. The results were definitive. She was not Anastasia Romanov. Further investigation revealed that she was most likely Franciszka Szenkalska, a Polish factory worker who had gone missing around the same time Anna Anderson appeared in Berlin. The enduring mystery. So if Anna Anderson wasn't Anastasia, how did she know so much about the Romanov family? How could she maintain such an elaborate deception for over 60 years? The truth is more complex than a simple case of fraud. Anna Anderson, or Franciszka Szenkalska, likely suffered from severe mental illness, possibly triggered by the trauma of World War I. She may have genuinely believed she was Anastasia, creating false memories and convincing herself of her royal identity. It's also possible that she encountered someone who had known the Romanov family and absorbed their stories, unconsciously incorporating them into her own identity. The human mind, especially one damaged by trauma, is capable of extraordinary self-deception. The real Anastasia, but let's not forget the real Anastasia, the vibrant, mischievous 17-year-old who faced her tragic end with courage. Contemporary accounts describe her as the most lively of the Romanov sisters, quick with a joke, always ready to lighten the mood, even in the darkest circumstances. Her letters, preserved in archives, reveal a young woman coming of age in extraordinary circumstances. She wrote about her hopes for the future, her love for her family, and her dreams of a normal life. In one of her last letters, written from the Ipativ house, she wrote, "We often sit by the window and look out at the street. I watch the people passing by and wonder what their lives are like." She couldn't have known that she had become a symbol of lost innocence, of a world forever changed by revolution and war. The cultural legacy, the mystery of Anastasia, has inspired countless books, films, and even a beloved animated movie. Each retelling captures something different about our fascination with this story. Perhaps it has the idea that tragedy might sometimes have a survivor, that love and hope can endure even in the darkest circumstances. The real story, however, is both more tragic and more meaningful than any fictional adaptation. Anastasia Romanov represents the end of an era, the last gasp of Imperial Russia, and the countless innocent victims of political upheaval. Her story also reminds us of the power of hope. For over 70 years, people wanted to believe that somehow, someone from that basement in Yekaterinburg had survived. The need for that hope was so strong that it sustained one of the longest-running identity mysteries in modern history. Lessons from the Lost Princess. What can we learn from the mystery of Anastasia? Perhaps it's that truth is often more complex than we imagine. Anna Anderson's story was simply a case of calculated deception. It was a tragedy of its own, the story of a damaged woman who may have genuinely believed she was someone else. The real Anastasia's story teaches us about resilience in the face of impossible circumstances. Even as her world collapsed around her, she maintained her spirit, her humor, and her love for her family. And the enduring fascination with her story tells us something about ourselves, about our need for hope, our desire for justice, and our wish that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys might escape the bad ending. Today, visitors can tour the reconstructed room in Yekaterinburg, where the Romanov family spent their final days. There's a church built on the site where their remains were discovered. The Russian Orthodox Church has canonized the family as saints, not for any miracles they performed, but as symbols of faith in the face of persecution. Anastasia Nikolaevna Romanov never became the lost princess who survived against all odds. She was, instead, a 17-year-old girl who died with her family in a basement in Siberia on a summer night in 1918. But in death, she became something perhaps more powerful. A symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. Her real story, not the mystery, not the imposter, but the actual young woman who lived and died as a Romanov, is one of courage in the face of unimaginable circumstances. She faced the end of her world with grace, humor, and an unbroken spirit. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that even in our darkest moments, even when everything we've known is ending, we can choose to face it with dignity, love, and hope. The mystery of Anastasia has been solved, but her real legacy lives on. She reminds us that every victim of political violence, every person caught in the chaos of history, has a story worth remembering, a life that mattered, and a spirit that endures long after the mystery fades away. If this story fascinated you as much as it did us, make sure you resubscribe to our channel because we dive deep into history's greatest mysteries and untold stories every week. What other historical mysteries would you like us to explore? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, the truth is often stranger and more meaningful than fiction. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop seeking the truth behind the mystery. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.